got to admit that we are not giving science journalism the necessary or the time that it really deserves on our part.
Well, here, golden opportunity for aspiring science broadcasters. I just want to come to Patrice. Patrice, you have a long experience of presenting and producing prime-time science programs in Belgium. Are these problems that we're hearing from the audience and from your fellow panelists, do they sound familiar?
Obviously. Thank you. Obviously, it's extremely familiar because all around the world, I think, the problem is the same. And I agree with the gentleman of Saudi Arabia and Syria. It's a problem of attractiveness. Okay, you said that I have a program, a regular program, broadcast on prime time. Okay, but it's incredibly hard to fight against a very competitive environment, even in the West. Okay, West is not an heaven for science journalism. It's more or less the same thing in the West and in the East, in the North or in the South. So personally, I'm a happy guy because of two things. Firstly, in my television, Belgian TV, I have a regular magazine. I have a regular scientific magazine. It could be obvious in the West, but it's not obvious. Okay? For example, in France, in the big, great France, there is no scientific regular magazine concerning research. There is no in France. Okay? So I'm happy for this reason. For the second reason is because I'm on broadcast on prime time. So it's not a broadcasting on in the middle of the night, for example. But to be able to fight against the competitive environment in Belgium, it's incredibly hard. But we succeed to that. Okay, and we have to prove that we are able to be attractive. As TF1, for example, is attractive. TF1 is a French channel. It's not only a French channel, but it's the richest channel of all the Europe. Okay? And in Belgium, our viewers, 99% of our viewers are able to watch from 40 to 400 channel, and for a very long time, for 30 years. Okay? So we have to fight against commercial Belgian channels and against French commercial channels like TF1, and TF1 is specialized in entertainment. But so we have to fight against this kind of programs, and we succeed.
You managed to make it attractive and accessible. For the questions from the audience, right in the top row, and then two gentlemen in the row below.
I'm Jean-Marc Fleury. I'm the Executive Director of the World Federation of Science Journalists. And first thing, I would like to thank Aljazeera. In fact, Aljazeera is doing something right now this week because it is a partner with the World Federation and the Qatar Foundation in having this one-week workshop in science journalism. So this is maybe promising, and eventually maybe you will have the caliber of science journalists you're looking for. But I'm struck by what is happening here in Qatar. And while funding for science is diminishing in Canada, in the US, right now here it is expanding in a big, big way. You just shocked me telling me that Horizon, from the BBC is stopped. This is a big disaster. My wife will be happy because now on Tuesday evening I'll be free. We can do something together beside watching the BBC program. But I meet people in the West who say that maybe the future of science journalism is outside of our region, and eventually it will be here, in the Gulf, in Africa. So I think we should be hopeful. And what we see here in Qatar is extremely promising.
Thank you. We have two gentlemen, one and then the other.
Okay, my name is Otula Awor. My name is Otula Awor. I'm from Kenya. I think one of the things which we have to realize is that for Middle East and Africa, science journalism is journalism of basic human needs. And if you are a science journalist, you have to be able to link your science stories to what's going on. I'll give you an example. In Kenya, we have crisis, there's politics, there are people being killed, but I was still very happy to see some of the science journalists link health issues in the so-called internally displaced camps, problems affecting children, the need for Kenya Medical Association or doctors to go to these areas. So there's need for science journalists who can really bring out basic human needs, issues of food, disease, health. And if you find good ones, the demand is very high, the turnover is very high. So if they are not properly paid, you find they go to PR jobs, they go to UN agencies, and move on. That's one thing. Another issue which is still missing, and editors really I've worked in newsrooms, you have to move and create almost intentionally some room, airtime for science. Because a lot of times it is an evolving profession within the media. And a lot of journalists, particularly editors, are very uncomfortable with what they don't know. They would rather use something from BBC, Reuters. I've seen a lot of good scientists, good science journalists move out of newsrooms because they can't stomach the level of ignorance in newsrooms. Because they argue political reporters, all you need is a radio or a recorder, type your story and go home. So it's a profession that needs a little bit of nurturing, although this does not mean science stories have to be done a favor. They have to earn their space. They have to earn their airtime. So I think I'll stop there, but this is a very good opening, and there's a lot of room for investigative journalism in the field of science.
No,
Thank you.
Absolutely, and you raised two very good points. One is that science is not something that's in a box. People often see it with blinkers. It's really technical. We can't deal with it. In the 21st century knowledge economy, science underpins our economic growth. Its business is involved in it. It's a part of politics. It's a part of ethics. It's a part of society. It shouldn't be treated differently to current affairs. Science is current affairs. The second excellent point you make is the fact that very often the people who are making decisions, editors, chief producers, are not themselves from a science background. And until there is a track within news organizations that people who feel comfortable with science, who understand the science, can actually reach a point where they can make decisions, they have responsibility, science will be fighting for space. We had another gentleman there. Yes, please.
I 100% agree with Mr. Ahmed that really we have short.
I am Rivenal Razafisson from Madagascar. In my country, science journalism is an innovation. But I'd like to ask the professor of sociology, as far as I am a student in sociology studies, what is your understanding of knowledge scientific circulation in the Arab communities? Thank you.
Actually, Shireen misspoke. I'm a professor of physiology. And so but that's okay.
I was told sociology. Your next degree.
That will be something I'll aspire for in the future. But I think science coverage here is not nearly as much as it should be. But I think there's two reasons about that. There's many reasons that have been mentioned, but one important reason is there isn't that much science being done in the region to begin with. You can't cover something that's non-existing. The other point that was made that I fully agree with is the future here is very, very bright, which means that if this future is realized, science journalists, the role here in the region would be so much more important than in industrialized countries where science is so well established to begin with. Okay? Taking that huge investment, and taking it to the public and convincing them that that's a worthwhile investment of their money. 2.8% of the GDP in Qatar is dedicated towards